The clatter of dislodged stones was like a thunderclap in the oppressive silence of our small alcove. Ivan's whispered word, patrol, hung in the frigid air, sharp as a shard of ice. Every muscle in my body tensed. My hand, already on the Tokarev, tightened its grip. The pistol felt woefully inadequate, a pop gun against the might arrayed against us, but it was all I had. Vasily, beside me, didn't even breathe. His eyes narrowed, the DP-28's muzzle tracking infinitesimally towards the bend in the ravine. Pyotr instinctively shielded Dimitri, his small frame hunched protectively.
We heard them before we saw them. The crunch of jackboots on frozen earth and loose scree. Guttural German voices, casual, unconcerned, as if they were on a Sunday stroll rather than deep in enemy territory. They were close, frighteningly close. The sounds echoed strangely in the confines of the ravine, making it difficult to pinpoint their exact location for a moment. Then, a shadow fell across the entrance to our narrow passage, just beyond the bend. A German helmet, the distinctive Stahlhelm, bobbed into view. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. Another followed, and then a third. A standard three-man patrol, likely tasked with sweeping the ravine floor for stragglers like us.
They paused at the bend, their voices clearer now, though still incomprehensible to me. One of them gestured with his rifle down the length of the ravine we'd just traversed. He seemed to be pointing out our tracks in the disturbed snow, faint as they were. My stomach clenched. They were hunters, and we were the prey, cornered. Ivan remained absolutely still, a statue carved from Siberian granite, only his eyes moving, tracking the Germans. His Mosin was rock steady. I knew his patience, his skill. He wouldn't fire unless they made a direct move towards our hiding spot, or unless I gave the word. But if they found us, it would be over in seconds. A burst of machine pistol fire into our cramped space would be devastating. One of the Germans, a non-commissioned officer by the look of his insignia, took a few steps past the bend, peering into the deeper shadows where our alcove was hidden. He was no more than 15 meters away. I could see the weariness in his face, the stubble on his chin, the cold redness of his exposed skin. He held an MP-40 submachine gun loosely in his hands. For a terrifying second, his eyes seemed to lock directly onto the shadowy recess where we lay hidden. I held my breath, expecting the shout of discovery, the immediate eruption of gunfire. Time stretched, becoming an elastic, unbearable thing. I could hear Dimitri's shallow, pained breathing beside Pyotr. I prayed the German couldn't. The NCO's gaze swept past our hiding place, lingered for a moment on the jumble of fallen rocks and the overhang, then moved on, apparently satisfied there was nothing of interest. He grunted something to his companions, and they began to move slowly down the ravine, away from us, their backs momentarily exposed. The relief was so sudden, so intense, it was almost painful. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding, my shoulders slumping slightly. Ivan gave a barely perceptible nod. Vasily, slowly, carefully, eased the tension on his trigger finger. But it wasn't over. The patrol was still in the ravine, still close. They could turn back. They could find something further down that made them suspicious. We watched them go,
their figures shrinking as they navigated the uneven floor until they disappeared around another bend further down. Only then, the immediate, suffocating pressure eased.
Too close, Vasily muttered, wiping a bead of sweat from his brow despite the biting cold. His knuckles were white where he gripped the DP-28. "They'll be back," Ivan stated, his voice a low rumble. "Or they will report the tracks. More will come." He was right. This was a temporary reprieve, nothing more. We couldn't stay in this alcove indefinitely. Dimitri's condition was a ticking clock. Pyotr, his face edged with worry, was checking the boy's bandage again. It was still seeping blood, though slower now.
"Pyotr, how long can he go without proper attention?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper.
Pyotr shook his head. "Hard to say, Sergeant. Infection is the main risk now, and the cold. If we can keep the wound clean and him warm, maybe a day, maybe less if fever sets in. He needs a surgeon, antibiotics, things we don't have." A day? We didn't have a day. Not here, not here, with German patrols sniffing around and panzers overhead. I looked at Dimitri. His eyes were closed, his face pale and clammy, but his chest still rose and fell. He was a fighter. He deserved a chance. All my men did. "Ammunition check," I ordered quietly. Vasily patted the ammo pans for the DP-28. "2 full pans left, Sergeant. Maybe half in the one currently loaded. Enough for a few good bursts, but not a sustained fight." Ivan checked his Mosin stripper clips. 3 clips, 15 rounds, and my knife. He touched the hilt of the large blade at his belt. I thought of my Tokarev. 2 spare magazines, 16 rounds in total, plus 1 in the chamber. Pitiful. And my PPSH was still out there, buried in the snow somewhere on that treacherous slope. A cruel irony. Food. We had none. Rations had run out yesterday. Water would soon be an issue too, unless we risked melting snow, which could carry its own dangers if not boiled. But a fire was out of the question. Desperation began to gnaw at the edges of my resolve. We were trapped, wounded, low on ammunition, and hunted. What options did we have? Surrender? The thought was a bitter pill, but for Dimitri's sake, perhaps... No. I pushed it away. We were Soviet soldiers. Surrender was not in our vocabulary, not while we could still fight, still resist. But what kind of resistance could we offer? "We need to get out of this ravine," I said finally. "Staying here is a slow death." "Up?" Vasily gestured towards the top of the ravine where the tanks roamed. "That is suicide." "Not necessarily straight up," I mused, my mind racing. "The ravine walls are steep, but not impossible everywhere. If we could find a less guarded spot, climb out under the cover of darkness. But darkness is hours away, and they'll be more alert then, expecting infiltration." Ivan spoke, his voice thoughtful. "The patrol went west, further down the ravine. If we go east, back the way we came, towards where Kostya was last seen." It was a risky thought, going back towards the main German force. But it was also the area they might least expect us to return to, assuming we were trying to escape their encirclement. And perhaps, just perhaps, Kostya had found a way, or left a sign. It was a slim hope, but slim hopes were all we had. They saw our tracks leading this way into the ravine, I countered. Going back means crossing our own trail, potentially leading them right to Kostya if he's still out there and hidden. The dilemma was a vice squeezing tighter. Suddenly, Pyotr, who had been listening intently while tending to Dimitri, spoke up, his voice hesitant but firm. "Sergeant, when we fell into the ravine, I saw something. To the north side, a little further back east from where you fell. A culvert, a drainage pipe maybe. It looked small, but perhaps wide enough for a man to crawl through. It was heavily overgrown." A culvert? A drainage pipe? My mind latched onto the idea. If it passed under whatever road or path the tanks were using on the northern edge of the ravine, it could be an escape route. A long shot, a dirty, cramped, dangerous shot, but a shot nonetheless. "Are you sure, Pyotr?" I asked, trying to keep the sudden surge of hope from my voice. He nodded. "Fairly sure, Sergeant. It was dark, and I was falling, but I remember seeing a dark circular opening in the ravine wall, near the base, mostly hidden by frozen bushes and snow." "Why didn't you say anything before?" Vasily asked, a hint of accusation in his tone. Pyotr looked down. "Everything happened so fast. The patrol, Dimitri. I wasn't sure it was important, or even real." "It's important now," I said. "Ivan, can you check it out? East, back up the ravine, north wall. Look for a culvert, overgrown. Be incredibly careful. If that patrol doubles back, or if there are sentries posted on the edge." Ivan nodded, his eyes glinting with a new focus. "I will be a shadow, Sergeant." He slipped his Mosin over his shoulder. "If it is there, and if it is clear, it is our only way. If it's a dead end, or if it's guarded." I didn't finish the sentence. We all knew the implications. As Ivan prepared to leave, Dimitri stirred. His eyes fluttered open, unfocused for a moment, then finding mine. "Sergeant," he rasped, his voice weak, Don't leave me." The plea, raw and vulnerable, struck me harder than any bullet. I knelt beside him. "Never, Dimitri. We get out of this together, or not at all. Pyotr's found us a possible way. Ivan is checking it now. You just rest. Conserve your strength." He tried to nod, a weak grimace of pain crossing his face. Pyotr gently rearranged the greatcoat we'd used to cover him. The boy was fading. We needed that culvert to be real. We needed it to be our way out of the Devil's Anvil. Ivan gave a final nod and melted into the shadows of the ravine, heading back east, back towards the Hornet's Nest. The waiting began anew, each second stretching, filled with the distant rumble of armor, the whisper of the wind, and the silent prayers of desperate men. Our fate now rested on a half-remembered hole in the ground and the stealth of a Siberian hunter.